So Scott, hello. How are you?
Hi. How's it going? I'm doing well.
It's going well, yeah. So we haven't actually played together. We haven't. This is the first time we've met, in fact.
Yeah, digitally. Yeah, it's kind of the sign of the times, I guess. But yeah, unfortunately, haven't played together. But
But
hopefully, sometime soon.
well,
Yeah.
next summer for sure. Yeah, we had the the kind of conversation with Erica Wazen, just a few days ago, and that was great. I mean, I don't know. I barely know Eric, but I've been seeing him for years, and we've spoken many times, kind of the hallway or the elevator, Juilliard and stuff.
Sure.
So I'm excited to have him up and to have him write this piece for us. In fact, tuba and string quartet.
Yeah, it's such a fun combination, I think. I always actually gravitate towards playing a lot of string music, and it obviously Awazin is a well-known composer. I was very honored to be able to participate in a commission with him. I think I'm very excited to see what he comes up with. I'm sure there's just so many textural opportunities there that I see, and yeah, I'm really excited to work on it when it becomes a thing. So
Have you played any music for tuba and string quartet before?
I haven't actually. I don't actually really even know if there are any real works for that instrumentation.
Right.
If there are, I haven't come across them. Maybe I've heard smatterings of recordings here and there, but nothing that I've seen in print, that's readily available. So yeah, I think it's an interesting. I mean, tuba as a solo instrument is relatively young, just kind of in general. So I think people are still exploring what it's capable of, which is kind of exciting to be honest. So yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of music for strings, or relatively more music for strings with horn, right? Brahms horn trio, Ligeti, stuff like that. But I did come across years ago a duo for viola and tuba.
Oh wow, okay.
Um, I'm not entirely sure if it's a joke or not. But,
I mean, so often composers use it as a joke instrument, which is I get it. I mean,
are you talking about the tuba or the viola?
the tuba. I mean, maybe both, right? I think that the tuba is kind of often seen as a little bit of an instrument that it hasn't really earned its maybe it hasn't earned it. It's maybe just like isn't necessarily seen on the same stage as a horn or trumpet. These instruments that have these masterworks written for them, or are put in these solo positions in major symphonic works. And not to say that those moments don't exist for the tuba too, but they're certainly not as often. And being a player that really enjoys expressing myself in the solo medium, I think that's kind of exciting, is to kind of be a part of figuring out what that voice is for the instrument. Because like I said, as players, we're kind of still figuring out like exactly what the kind of, we're still defining the voice of the instrument, I think, in a lot of ways, which is an exciting thing to be a part of.
So how did you, I mean, I'm sure you're asked this question. I'm asked this question as a viola player, because people say, why viola? Because, if you play violin or cello or piano, no one comes and says, why piano? But how did you arrive at the tuba? And was it roundabout? Did you play another brass instrument first, or you switched from recorder to tuba overnight? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of, what's that?
from Michigan, right?
Yeah. I grew up just north of Detroit, and then so I played piano from a very young age, like maybe first grade until getting into middle school. And then, middle school in Michigan was the time that band programs start. And so I'm the middle child. So like my brother, we had a piano around the house, and my brother went into band. And so they were trying to start an orchestra at my school. we didn't have a strings program. I kind of went to a smaller school district, and so they were trying to start a string program, and I signed up to play the double bass.
Okay.
And
so you practice to these low sounds.
yeah, maybe. I actually have no idea like what really, I think maybe I thought I could play in orchestra and do like kind of jazz stuff too, which was also kind of exciting to me at the time. I don't know. It's hard to get in my, 10-year-old mind and kind of unpack that, but so then there weren't enough kids who signed up for the orchestra. So they said, okay, all the kids who signed up for orchestra, you have to join band, which I was like not necessarily upset by. So I just had to choose an instrument, and I chose the trumpet. And like I said, I had been playing piano and wasn't particularly good at that. And so at the beginning of these band classes, they're just saying things like, you're just learning how to read music. You're learning how to build a scale. You're learning how, all the things that you have to do to kind of just break into making music. And I had been playing piano, and so reading music was already something I was super familiar with. And on top of that, I was kind of having this response of, I only have to play one note at a time. I'm over here like coming from piano where you're expected to, play two hands and stuff. I'm like, all I have to do is blow in this instrument and get one note to come out of it. That seems pretty easy at the level, at that 6th grade level. So I kind of just was ahead of the class, and the band director, who I actually credit with a lot of my success, recognized it right away. And within a month of joining band, he said, we need a tuba player, and I want to put this extra challenge in front of you, and we'd love for you to take on playing the tuba. So I was asked to take it on. I was just kind of a tiny kid, and for the first like year and a half I played the tuba was in a stand. Like I couldn't hold it up actually.
Was this a smaller tuba?
Yeah, it was like a 3/4 size tuba, like a beginning size tuba. And I was just kind of like a tiny kid at the time. I hadn't, hit my growth spurt or whatever. And
wait, how you were 10 years old?
Well, I was in 6th grade. Well, I guess I don't have a good frame of reference of how old that is, but
yeah.
So
how did it work in terms of like embouchure and stuff? Because I would imagine it takes, right, embouchure, for those non-brass players out there, right? You want to describe what that means, but also in terms of the muscles, right?
Yeah, so I mean, all the brass instruments are really kind of like anchored at the corners of your mouth here, kind of keeping that together. And then, as however big the mouthpiece is, it's kind of varying levels of like the aperture gets smaller or larger depending, tuba has a fairly large aperture as compared to a trumpet or a horn. So I think that I was, for whatever reason, like really adept at just kind of picking that stuff up. Like my director would just be like, hey, go off in this practice room and just like try and figure out how to sound better. And I just kind of did that, and I started taking lessons. And another really like interesting
with the tuba player.
Yeah. I started, like my parents started driving me around for lessons. And another really adept thing that my middle school band director did, which totally didn't stunt my growth as a musician, was that he said, I'm going to give you this instrument, the tuba, but the tuba parts are all really easy and you're not going to struggle to play them because it's a 6th grade band. You're going to play the first trumpet part on the tuba. And then a week before the concert, you're going to switch and learn the tuba part. And then for the concert, you'll play the tuba part because we need a tuba, but you'll learn the first trumpet part and play along in band class every day on that music, because a B flat tuba and a B flat trumpet, if you're reading off trumpet music, actually kind of, you can play the same fingerings on it. If you're, a written C is going to be open on a B flat tuba, no valves, and it's also open on a trumpet. So coming from trumpet, I could just pretend I was basically playing a trumpet and the same notes would sound obviously 2 octaves below it, but so it sounds super weird, and I'm sure it annoyed the crap out of my classmates and things, but it was great for my development because I never saw the tuba as a limiting thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is perceived as such by a lot of people, because I always, when you get later on as a tuba player and you become a professional, whenever you go somewhere, um, people always say, "I never knew the tuba could do that." That's the first line out of everybody's mouth. You know, I've been lucky enough to solo on tour with the band, and so play the same solo maybe like 10 times on a tour, and for people every night. And after, when you're a soloist, after the show, you go out and greet the audience in the lobby and shake people's hands when that was a thing we could do.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting just because the overwhelming feedback you get from an audience when you're a tuba player is just like, I didn't know that could happen on a tuba. I didn't know you could play fast notes. I thought you were an oompa instrument, or just playing the like low kind of flabby notes, or whatever that, whatever their perception might be. You're kind of upending that. And I think that my band director putting me on those trumpet parts really kind of took this roadblock out of my mind that gets naturally baked into a lot of young tuba players, is that because you're playing the tuba, you can't actually play as complicated of music as a trumpet or a horn or those instruments that are playing that music in the band. I never had that kind of condition set in my mind. I was always,
there were no limits, no self-imposed limits or externally imposed limits from
right. And I attribute that mindset to so much of my development that came later in college. When I developed the abilities that you do when you go through music school, when you're practicing so much, I never thought twice of picking up a solo that was written for trumpet or violin or anything. I was just like, I can play anything. And that's kind of young arrogance, sure, but also that is a powerful kind of delusion to have when it comes to pushing yourself to get better. And I still sometimes kind of think that it's a really helpful thing. I talk sometimes in master classes to young students about having useful delusions about your own playing, kind of believing that you can do anything and play anything, and there's nothing you couldn't accomplish on the instrument, because that kind of sets you up to approach things in a fearless way. And that's powerful, I think. Even though in the practice room, you kind of have to have a different mindset. That's that you're actually kind of working on your craft and understanding your limits and trying to push that boundary more and more and more. But when you perform, you kind of have to have this like Superman on your chest, and to spare the kind of toxic masculine metaphor there. But you just have to kind of be fearless. And I think that I attribute that to a lot of my abilities, especially in solo playing. So,
well, let me ask you this, running with that a little bit more. Do you think this has affected you, or how has this affected you, not just as a musician and as a tuba player, but as an attitude, as a human being, in fact, in life?
I think that it's probably shaped who I am in so many ways. And, it's interesting because I think I've also been kind of, there might be something to it in other areas of my life, because, in a lot of ways, my dad was a thrill seeker and loved roller coasters and, doing things like that. And so there's a fearlessness and a go for it kind of attitude that I also kind of bring into what I do in music. There's an idea of kind of pushing your limits and getting outside of your comfort zone. Like outside, you know, one of my main passions outside of music is cycling, you know, riding my bike long distances. And so that's kind of also like this endeavor that challenges you to think, what might I be capable of? Or if I have this perceived limit, could I do something that would blow past that expectation? And what are the steps in between the little goals I have to set myself to get there? And that's something that I've always just had this natural ability to do, is to like set this goal that's probably unrealistic. Also, maybe some might say, you know, describe it as, you know, just kind of crazy or something like that. But I've always been good at being like, I wonder if I could do that, and then take little steps to find my way to get there. And even if I don't make that crazy goal, you certainly progress yourself somewhere outside of what you thought your direction was going to be.
Right.
And I think that that's kind of incredible when that's kind of like what it's all about to me, I guess.
Well, you think about these different professions and mindsets, and I think about a little cartoon I saw about engineers, which was interesting, and it showed what a normal person does. It showed a normal person walks up to a button and pushes the button and gets an electric shock, and then the normal person's response is like, "Oh, I don't want to do that again." And the engineer goes up and pushes the button, gets an electric shock. It's like, I wonder if it'll happen the next time I do it. And it's similar kind of, you know, this mindset that you're talking about. And a cyclist, for me as a cyclist also, I remember doing the first, maybe it was years ago at this point, but doing the first 100-mile Century ride. And, you know, the idea of, you know, cycling 100 miles, you know, bicycling 100 miles in a day, it's incredible. And then you do it, and there's this huge sense of accomplishment and thrill from having done that, you know, as you're limping and staggering to your, you know, to the bath, basically.
Right, exactly. And in the same token, similarly to how I'm sure so many instrumentalists approach their craft, the craft side of what they do is that those things are not something that you get off your couch and do. You don't just like buy a bike, get off your couch and ride 100 miles. I mean, I suppose you could survive that hypothetically, but it's certainly not going to be fun. And so there's like the challenge is not necessarily like, well, first the challenge is conceiving of doing the thing, of thinking of yourself as capable of riding 100 miles. That's kind of a hurdle that some people never get over. But then there's the challenge of saying, well, right now I can only ride 10 miles. How do I get to riding 100 miles?
Right, sure.
And that is also what we do on our instruments every day. And so I think, I guess to circle it back is like, as a tuba player, I always thought I could ride the 100 miles because I think early on in my approach to the instrument, I was never told tubas don't ride 100 miles.
Sure.
So like tubas can do tubas can play the first trumpet part. So don't ever think that you can't do that. And then all it is from there is deciding what steps it takes to be able to achieve whatever goal it is that you have.
Right. That's great. Well, let me ask you a little bit about what you're doing now. So you're Sergeant First Class in the Army.
Yes. Yeah.
Having joined the U.S. Army Field Band.
Yeah.
And I want to just mention a personal connection I have. Well, I know a few people in the band also, string players. But my father after it was during the Korean War, he was drafted, and then the Korean War ended before he actually entered active service. Went through basic training, and he wound up being pulled into what was then called the 7th Army Symphony. And he played the cello, and he wound up touring through Europe, mainly, I think mainly Germany, but also some France and maybe Holland or something. I think mainly it was Germany. And playing, I think he might have, wasn't a sergeant, maybe just a specialist or something, I'm not sure his rank. But yeah, he served in the army as a cellist, in fact.
I mean, it's amazing when you think back, even just throughout the history of our country, how many, oddly enough, the military as unlikely as it may be, has always been kind of a supporter or an employer of musicians. I mean, we can tie it all the way back to 1776 if you want, with the fifes and drums that are in that are signaling and things like that. So there's always kind of been music in the military has always had a connection. And my father also served during Vietnam, and not in Vietnam. He served in Germany, but he was drafted and served during that time. And so, I mean,
as a musician, or
no, my dad was an auto mechanic, but he served as a mail clerk in Vietnam. And so, oddly enough, I never actually really pegged myself to be, it wasn't something that I said, oh, I'm going to join the military one day. But it was always kind of, when you get into thinking about being a professional tuba player, you have to kind of understand that your job options are limited, or if you want to have a quote unquote traditional path, you're either going to get a job in an orchestra, or you're going to get a job in a military band, or you're going to get a job teaching at a college. Like those are the three traditional kind of. And now I think it's great that you can kind of find all these niches that are not under that umbrella. But when I was coming up, that kind of seemed like the three areas you could go into. So I always kind of thought maybe, I was always of the opinion that I'm just going to go for everything and see where I land. So I did, yeah. I mean, I went through my undergrad and graduate school, and I freelanced in Philadelphia area for.
So undergrad was Curtis.
I went to undergrad at the University of Michigan, and I graduated there, and I came to Curtis in 2008, and I did a diploma there, just a 2-year kind of postgraduate diploma. They don't have a master's degree there, but.
And you're studying with?
I studied with both Carol Jansch and Paul Kraswicki.
Right, Carol, who recommended you for the festival.
Yeah, exactly. Carol and I actually went to Michigan together. So she's one of my best friends, and we've known each other for, decades now. So where was I here? So
you moved to Philadelphia.
Yes. Okay. Right. So I came to Philly to, when I was joining up at Curtis, they were just kind of restructuring their whole approach to limiting the ages of their students. So they had kind of.
Oh, wait, we should say this is the Curtis Institute of Music Conservatory in Philadelphia.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. And historically they've been a school that's kind of considered one for. They've always had like an age limit. I'm sure it's changed throughout the years, but when I was there, I was actually a little bit too old to be admitted to the school, but they were kind of rethinking how they were approaching, especially brass and winds, because if you're trying to admit students that are only in their late teens, and your orchestra sounds more or less like a professional orchestra, to get that same kind of level in the brass and woodwinds, it makes a little bit more sense to include older individuals.
And their vocal program, I think, goes up to 30 even, maybe.
Right, yeah. So they kind of were restructuring all of that. I was one of the first brass students that was over the traditional age limit. So I did 2 years there, basically like a artist diploma, and then I freelanced for like five and change years. And
Philadelphia Orchestra also, right?
yeah, I became a regular sub there. I still lucky enough to play with them regularly, and that's kind of, when I think back to where I kind of came up and ending up in a place where I can spend time regularly sitting in with a top five orchestra, I kind of have to pinch myself. That's
That's amazing.
yeah,
Playing tuba. I mean, you're not even just cannon fodder back at the second violins, but you're the only tuba player then.
yeah, for better or for worse sometimes. Yeah, um, yeah. I mean, it's a kind of crazy to think over the scope of a career, but yeah. So then from there, I auditioned for several military bands and orchestras and all of those things, and did the whole audition circuit where you get close, you don't get it, but you kind of are there knocking on the door.
Mm.
And yeah, and then I've only ever won one audition in my life, and it was the one that got me my job in the field band. So
We only need one, right?
right, that's all you need. Yeah, you only have to win one for it to count. And I feel very lucky to say that I think I've fallen into what I consider to be one of the best jobs I could have ever dreamed of getting. Uh, the field band is an organization that is an outreach organization, so it is unique in the military sphere in that our primary role is not ceremonial. We are a public outreach organization. So our mission is to go everywhere in the world, but mostly in the domestic United States, and connect with people, which is, what music is really designed to do. So we go and we play concerts, and we try to establish a connection between the military and the public that it serves. And that's kind of, when I got the job, I don't think I fully understood the power of that mission. But it only takes a couple of tours and trips around the country to kind of understand like what you're kind of working to do, which is to bring people together. And I think that I feel really lucky to do what I do. So
Does the band play all over the United States, or does it concentrate on regions that I can imagine might be more overtly military welcoming?
it's interestingly, we actually try to focus on places where the military is not. So, like one of the whole reasons that the organization exists is that, in World War II, you had as high of a percentage as 12% of the population served sometime, so if you were an American, you likely either served yourself or knew someone, had a family member who served. So the public military connection, that it was very much understood, and kind of there was a strong bond there, or people understood what it meant to kind of be a soldier. And now that percentage is less than 1%. So that it has become something that's a little bit more separate from normal American life. And so our job is to kind of try to bridge that gap. So we play, and one of the things I love about our job is that one night we might play in the nicest hall in Chicago. Like, for example, right before COVID started, we were scheduled to play in Chicago Symphony Hall. And that we ended up getting sent home early from that tour, but we might play in a hall like that one night, and then the very next night play in a high school gymnasium.
Sure.
In a very, very small town. And the wonderful thing is that you immediately understand that those audiences are not as different as you perceive them to be when you're not in the room. And that the people and the way that they connect with the music that you play is there's way more common ground there than you ever really could understand unless you are in the room and experience it. So that's kind of one of the more powerful things of what we do, is that you get to perform everywhere. You get to see every corner of the country, and the best part of it is you get to go into those communities and connect with people by doing what we love, which is, playing music. And
well, let me ask you this, musician to musician, and I don't know if this is an okay question to ask or not, although you probably asked it a lot. As an emissary of the military, does that, I would think that could have the potential to put you in a possibly awkward position if the U.S. government is doing something that you might not, if the U.S. military is doing something you might not agree with. At the same time, you're again a representative, an outreach representative of the military. So I'm sure this is something that you've thought about a lot and that probably is discussed quite openly. How does this figure in?
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of cross section of that. I think one thing that you kind of come to terms with pretty early when you join the military is that you kind of there's yourself as your private self, your personal self, and there's yourself as it pertains to taking an oath to serve the Constitution. And those are things that, not that you have to, you're not giving up one or the other, you're just kind of, you have to have a very nuanced perception of when you're in with each of those kind of situations and what the kind of, what your role is at that moment. And in the thing that I kind of hang my hat on is that our organization is always one who is, very intent on spreading a message that is positive, and that is one that is a unifying message. And that goes for I've never been in a situation where I felt like that wasn't what our end goal was, is to bring people together and not to do anything else. We're really there to connect. And because we are not only are we not really trying to, but we're really not allowed to engage in politics as soldiers. That's, the military is intended to be a non-political entity.
Right.
So really we're there to, whatever the divide is, wherever we find ourselves, kind of whatever fence we find ourselves talking over to anybody, our job is to reach over that fence and try and find common ground with people and connect with people. And actually I don't think there's any better language to do that with than music, because it kind of strips everything away and you just connect kind of on an emotional level with people. So yes, it can be a complicated line to walk at times, but we are as an organization, we're a unifying force first, and that's kind of where I put myself down as an artist in that category.
So did you have to go through basic training?
Yeah. It's everything you might imagine it to be. It's actually this just kind of a really crazy experience, because you win an audition, and as a musician, that's a culmination of maybe decades of work. For you,
like, congratulations, you won the audition. Here's a rifle.
I mean, yeah, kind of, and you end up kind of getting thrown into this, well, not thrown. I mean, I think they do kind of give you an idea of the gravity of what it is you're actually getting into. But it's always a culture shock, I think, when you get there on the first day and the drill sergeants are yelling at you, and you just kind of, you adapt. I think that's, and And actually, like, if I can look back on it, for everybody who's been through basic training has basic training stories that they can tell you about some thing that they went through. But I actually think it did make me a stronger individual. If nothing else, then it teaches you to cope with stress in a way. You're there for 10 weeks, and every day you're dealing with a stressful situation, whether it be waking up at 5 a.m. to go and run 2 miles, or being yelled at to do more push-ups, or learning how to shoot an M16, or all of these different things that you're asked to do. You're kind of overcoming. Each of those is kind of dealing you to cope with a situation that's outside of your wheelhouse, as it were. Especially as coming through music school and conservatory, and then being kind of a freelance. It's just such a different way of life that I think it would be impossible not to grow in that situation in some way.
So if everyone has basic training stories, what's one of your basic training stories?
My favorite one is that, so I actually, when I went to basic, I was 27, and I was turning 28 years old while I was there.
You were an old man, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. In basic training, for people joining the Army, that's really old. I mean, not...
Have you fired a gun before, or?
I mean, just recreationally in like Boy Scouts or, things like that. I wasn't like, I'm not a weapons enthusiast or anything like that. But I was older than a lot of the people who were there. I already had my gray hair coming in. And so I was certainly, teased plenty for that.
They call you grandpa or something.
Yeah, stuff like that. But I turned 28 while I was there. And on my birthday, one of the things you have to go through while you're at basic is they expose you to tear gas. And it's unpleasant, but it's kind of this thing you have to go through, and you learn how to wear a gas mask and clear it. It's training you for kind of situations where you might find yourself exposed to that. What's that?
Like protesting,
for example. Yeah. So that happened on my birthday. When they don't like tell you beforehand. They're not like, you don't get a schedule or a syllabus or anything like that. You just wake up and they go like, here's what you're doing today. And so on my birthday, that was kind of what I woke up to. I didn't tell anybody it was my birthday, because I probably would have had to do some extra push-ups for that. But so I just kind of kept it a secret and just endured it. And looking back, I think it's a fodder for good stories, to tell my kids one day. So
I'm just wondering, some of I consider myself in pretty decent shape, but I look around at colleagues of mine, and amongst musicians, they're not necessarily known for being the most athletic types, I think it's safe to say. And I'm just wondering, some of the people who might have won the audition might have suffered much more than others, in fact.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, basic training is designed to take anybody who is at any fitness level who is declared like fit for service. So before you even can come to the final round of our audition process, you have to go through the military entrance processing, and they basically say, okay, you're fit to serve. That's just ruling out medical kind of disqualifications and things like that. But yeah, I mean, if you go into basic training as a relatively fit individual, it is certainly not going to make you less fit, but it's maybe not as challenging on that side of it. I certainly got much better at doing push-ups and running and things like that, but I was already kind of a cyclist before that. And so it didn't like bring me to my knees or anything like that. Now, if you go in and you're not a super fit individual, they will make you fit one way or another, So that's kind of what it's designed to do, is to get you into shape. So it can be more or less pleasant depending on how you go into it.
So going on to music. So one of the questions I was going to ask you was if you had to list your top 5 desert island pieces. And again, they don't have to be classical even. But I said, usually when I'm talking to other, kind of quartet player types, you have a pretty good idea of, what some are going to be. It's going to be Beethoven 131 or 132 is bound to be on there, or both. So for a brass player, for a tuba player,
Yeah.
what's on there for you?
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but it won't be a Beethoven string quartet. Not anything that, not that there's anything, I love them just the same. I just don't have maybe as personal a connection to them as many, chamber musicians do. I think for my top all-time, maybe most closest work to my heart is probably the Barber Violin Concerto.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that would be at the top of my list. And then, I'm kind of
actually. I was expecting Bruckner or Shostakovich, Shosti 5 or.
I certainly like those composers and their works. I think that something about Barber's lyricism really speaks to me. And then I'm kind of like pragmatic in a lot of the ways I approach things. So I would also, like, if I were crafting a thing, if I were actually, like, my list of my top 5 favorite pieces are probably actually not the things that I would bring to a desert island, if that makes sense. Because
right. No, I'm not just the longest pieces, because
right. Yeah.
Oh my God, 5 years in, I can't listen to this, but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would also probably bring, some of the symphonic masterworks, and as a brass player, naturally, I'm going to say Mahler 2 or, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I had to choose a Mahler symphony, it would definitely be the second. But then I also would probably bring, I would certainly include some kind of popular music in it, because to me, popular music is a great, I actually love it as a medium. I think it's can be just as sophisticated as anything, really. So there would certainly be I don't know, those kinds of things are a lot more fleeting for me, though. I go through like modes where I could be like, I'm really into Lady Gaga for like a week or two, and she just released a new album, which is really great. And so.
All right, so give me a song, a Lady Gaga song. If you were going to go on a desert island tomorrow, you're going to get stranded. Which Lady Gaga song would you bring with you?
I think I would probably choose a more classic Lady Gaga song like "Bad Romance" if I had to go, for the desert island list. Although I haven't listened to that song in a while, but that's a really great tune, and it's got
that might be the only Lady Gaga song that I can name off the top of my head, actually.
Yeah, it's famous for a reason, right? And that's kind of how I think a lot about pop music. That I sometimes am sad that as classical musicians we are kind of conditioned to ridicule it a little bit, because popular music is popular for a reason. It obviously connects with people in some kind of visceral way, right? Otherwise it wouldn't like go to the heights that it does. And so I don't kind of think poorly of that. I also have one of probably my favorite other two.
Let me just interrupt you. Yeah, there's this great quote from Louis Armstrong, which is that I think if I have it right, it goes something like, if it sounds good, it is good.
Right. Yeah. Good is good. And it doesn't, and it kind of, that transcends all genre and definition, really. If it's good, it's good. And if it's not good, it's not good. So.
I mean, you can go to a French restaurant, a Michelin-starred restaurant, and have this incredible meal, takes, 3 hours. And you can also, get a hot dog on 72nd and Broadway, Gray's Papaya, and it can be just about the most amazing thing in the world, right?
Right. Yeah. So, oh, yeah. And it all depends on the context in which you experience it, right? So
sure.
That hot dog, if you've been out with your friends until 2 a.m, might be like the perfect, it's like the music should just be the perfect for the it needs to be perfect for the context that you're in. So
Right.
sometimes like I'm in a mood to just listen to uh yeah, just like the most kind of commercial pop music there is. And for whatever reason, my mood is going to suit me to listen to something like Lady Gaga. And then in the next, maybe later, I'm in a much more chill mood and I might listen. One of my favorite folk musicians is a guy named, well, he goes by The Tallest Man on Earth, which is, he's just a folk musician from Sweden, I think. But so those are two. I kind of
give me a song of his, because I'm going to put links to some of the stuff.
Yeah. So my favorite song by him is probably a song called "Love Is All."
Love Is All.
Yeah, and
English or Swedish? Then
that
is it in English or Swedish?
it's in English. Yeah, he sings in English. I think he lives in Brooklyn. I think he's just originally. If you see his name, his actual name, it's a very Scandinavian kind of situation. But yeah, and then, geez, yeah, I think how many is that? That's 4 already, right?
That's 4, yeah. So
yeah,
Barber Violin Concerto, Mahler Second. Is there any particular violinist for the Barber that you recommend?
I'm probably partial to Gil Shaham's recording of that piece. Although I also, I mean, I enjoy Itzhak Perlman's recording of it as well. But I think if I had to choose, the Shaham is probably there's a gramophone one where it's Barber and the Korngold concertos on the same LP. And it's
great.
It's a very good record. If you ever see it on vinyl, you should definitely pick it up. Let's see. So that now I'm down to the last one, and I feel like I haven't picked any jazz, which I have to pick something jazz, right?
Pretty much.
So, oh man, if you'll spare me the indulgence, I'm going to put a whole LP on there because there's an Oscar Peterson record that's just him. It's just solo piano tracks. It's just him playing by himself. And I think I could listen to that every day. He's so kind of virtuosic, but well reserved. He's not just flashy for the sake of flashy.
Sure.
And I have it on vinyl, and it's always just like one of the first records I choose to put on. So I guess that's
the name of that. Do you know?
It might just be called like solo or like piano tracks. It's some like very simple. I'll have to pull it out and send it to you.
Sure.
But yeah, that album is amazing.
I think I have a recording of Fred Astaire singing from Top Hat, these songs, I guess they're the Gershwin songs, I think with Oscar Peterson. And it's of course, Fred Astaire is amazing in his timing, but Peterson's, the accompaniment, it's so, the word that comes to mind is so deft. It's just so perfect. He gives Fred Astaire all the room he needs, but then when he has time for a little flourish, it's nothing flashy, and there isn't this sense of this ego kind of bursting through, but it's just kind of perfect.
Yeah,
perfect.
I think that's a really good characterization of his playing, and that's actually something I really respect. Kind of coming from a musician's level, is there's so much of what we do ego can get in the way, and I am the first to kind of put myself in that category occasionally. Brass players kind of express their ego in terms of like not respecting dynamics or something like that, yeah, I think that, but our ego kind of always overshadows maybe what the musician inside of should be, the decision that's the right decision. And I think Oscar Peterson is probably always making that. He's making the right decision all the time. And I love that. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. So you're a reader, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are some authors that come to mind of books? It's interesting because I did a big renovation in 2016 and then afterwards the things were covered with dust. I covered them, but it still, there was so much that I had to throw out. So I wound up culling my whole library.
Oh, wow.
And I just decided to throw out. I actually threw out about 80% of the books that I have.
Wow.
And it felt really good. But part of the decision, I'd pull out a book and it would be like, will I ever read this again? And if so, I'll keep it. Or does this book have incredible, overwhelming sentimental value for me? This volume, not just this book, this one volume. And of course, there's not too many like that. And it was amazing how many books I was really very happy to just give away and have never even thought about since. Pretty much any of those books. There's been a few that I've bought again. I want to read it again. But there are books that I return to and I'll read every, at this point in my age, every 10 years, there's some books maybe. So what would you have, what are some things that come to mind in your collection, books you've been really moved by? Fiction, nonfiction?
Well, I'm certainly a book hoarder, so I haven't been able to pull that trigger as far as culling my collection. Both my girlfriend and I are, we have a lot of books, so there's books everywhere in our house. My favorite author is Kurt Vonnegut, and I kind of I have a favorite author and a favorite book, and it's interesting that my favorite book is actually not by my favorite author, but I think I appreciate Vonnegut's kind of overall approach to writing and his humor and how he kind of can take something, he can see things that are incredibly dark and troubling and disarm them. I think he uses humor in a way to get at things and disarm them in a way that is very speaks to me. And I know that I know he's my favorite author because I have a tattoo of him. So yeah, I felt called.
Wait, is it his face or?
Yeah, actually it's here on my arm, so it'd be easy enough to show. I don't know if I can see it well, but yeah.
Oh my God, it's beautiful. Wow.
So this is actually, these are my three.
Like a stained glass window or something.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be, like a church window. And I also have Stravinsky here on my inner arm too. And then back is my favorite painter, Mark Rothko.
Okay. Wow.
But that's kind of we can talk tattoos some other time. But he's my favorite author, and but my favorite book is actually Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. So, and that book I have attached to that book specifically because I first read it in high school at a kind of formative time, and it addresses war in a way that it kind of turned, I don't know if I was like totally ready for it at that age, but it made me see things in a different light. And I think that's like what a great piece of art can do, is kind of reframe something about life for you. And that book certainly did it for me. So that is kind of easily my favorite book, far and away from, and I've read it many times. So,
I mean, it's interesting because both authors have in common, right? They're both veterans, and I mean, I think of Breakfast of Champions has the war kind of, it's very present.
Yeah.
And in much of Vonnegut's
yeah,
work.
That's
22. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that if retroactively I kind of look and say it makes sense that I found my way into the military somehow, but because I've always kind of gravitated to these pieces of art that kind of deal with what might bring people to go to war with each other, and what about the human condition can kind of allow that to happen. Because I think somewhere in there is also the secret to preventing it.
Yeah, that's great.
So yeah, Vonnegut's interesting because he's kind of almost a sci-fi writer that also addresses these things that are to do with war. I mean, Breakfast of Champions is certainly a book that has all kinds of otherworldly, non-reality things, or Slaughterhouse Fives has all kinds of time travel and things in it. So, there's interesting thing. The way that he approaches it is so different than Joseph Heller, where he's kind of just kind of telling a story more like.
So real as to be, Joseph Heller mentioned, so real as to be almost absurd.
Right.
And in Kurt Vonnegut, maybe so absurd as to be almost real.
Yeah. I mean, they're both real intensely funny writers, which I think is something that I do a lot in my own life, is try to disarm kind of situations that might be intense with humor, and maybe that's why I'm a tuba player. I don't know. Yeah, I think both of their approaches is kind of, I identify with them a lot. So
when you said you had a Vonnegut tattoo, for a minute there, I was worried you might have one of his doodles from, from several of his books, which would be a great tattoo, but might be questionable in various other ways.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people that have those. I think those are the kind of predictable Vonnegut tattoos. But I conceived of this tattoo idea as I know in many ways I think of art for me, all of the creative endeavors, whether it's writing or music or painting or anything really, to be kind of on a spiritual level. And so I decided to get this tattoo concept of my 3 favorite artists depicted in that kind of, like you said, stained glass windows. It's almost kind of supposed to be a church window, kind of referencing it being on that spiritual kind of level. So that's kind of the whole concept of it. And I conceived of it all 3 of them together. So
yeah, no, it looks amazing. So let's finish with talking about the Kodai, because we're going to put a video we're going to put a video up of you playing the Kodai, I think Adagio, right?
Yeah.
Originally written for violin, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. Yeah. So that video is taken from a recital I did a little while back. It's recent, but not super recent. And like I've said kind of before, I've always kind of been interested in understanding how the tuba might sound not like a tuba, if that makes sense. Trying to think about ways in which we might, I hear, if you sit and listen to something like the Bach double violin concerto or something, you can hear the way that violinists or string players might approach phrasing in a way that you just don't hear on brass instruments much. And I don't have like illusions of grandeur that I'm somehow on the level of being able to make music on that kind of level, but I do try to think of my own music making as striving for an ideal that is outside of myself. So when I think about playing something like the Kodai, it is inspired by that kind of beautiful, pure string sound, and thinking about how an instrument that a lot of people would characterize maybe as cumbersome or clumsy or humorous, or however your average person might think of the tuba, and how can I come outside of that? How can I achieve something that is, I don't know, otherworldly in a way?
Transcend the
expectations
limitations of the instrument, in fact,
right,
and make it something else in some ways. Yeah.
So that actually that entire recital was all string music. Every piece I programmed on that. I did some Glier character pieces that were originally for cello. I did the Chopin Opus 3 Polonaise Brillante. So there were all of the pieces. I picked them because I wanted to expand what the audience's perception of what the tuba might sound like. And I think actually in a way the Kodai was one of the most challenging pieces, because that is a piece that is driven by phrasing that is maybe not exactly what you expect it to be. It's not, the phrasing construction is not one that is entirely predictable. And as a musician, you kind of have to design your approach to overcome those things. And to do on a string instrument where you have a bow that, bows and wind are obviously very different things. So a composer is conceiving of something, a phrase as it might be played on a bowed instrument, and then how do I translate that into an instrument where I have to take breaths and things like that. It was just this immense challenge, but also an immense pleasure to be able to present what I thought was actually a fairly effective performance of it.
It sounds beautiful.
Oh, thank you. And maybe I think that if you were to stack it up against a master violinist playing it, I don't think that my version would hold any air really, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a valid thing to do on an instrument still, so yeah, that was kind of my whole concept of that entire recital. I also did things like the Le Grand Tango, the Piazzolla, and there are challenges in a piece like that. For example, that's like a 11-minute work for cello that only has like 4 bars of rest. So as a wind player, that becomes just basically like running a marathon, right? You don't get any time with the instrument off of your face. And so each piece that I picked had this different challenge. And the Kodai was one that really challenged me to make great phrases, which I always try to do. But, especially on that, I really felt like I had to push myself to get there. So, yeah.
Okay, well, Scott, this is great. It's been so nice to talk to you, and I'm really looking forward to hanging out next summer, 2021.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And we'll see what Eric comes up with for us.
I can't wait to see it, see it and then hear it and get to play it. I'm just super, super psyched. And thanks so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Okay, Scott. Well, be safe. Talk to you later.
Thanks.
Bye.